The President, please be seated. The court is now back in session. We would like to now hand over to the lead co-lawyers to proceed with further questions if they would wish to do so. So counsel who has been authorized to put questions to the witness, you may now proceed.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Good afternoon to the bench, esteemed colleagues, parties, and members of the audience. Mr. Witness, good afternoon to you as well. Do you hear me, sir?
Merci.
Response, yes, I do.
Vous avez répondu.
I understand, therefore, that my message is getting through, Mr. Witness. I want to focus. Perhaps I should introduce myself first. Barnaby Necui, I'm international lawyer for the civil parties. And I'd like to start our exchange on the subject of the visit by the Japanese delegation that you took to Siem Reap in 1978. You've told us a little bit about it this morning with the international co-prosecutor. Do you recall this?
Some response. Yes, I do. I remember the brief content of that.
Très bien. Je vous remercie.
Good, thank you very much. I dare say you recall that this visit took place in September 1978. Is that correct?
Some response. I don't remember the exact date.
Très bien, Monsieur le Témoin.
Very good. I understand. But in looking back at the documents that came up this morning, that is indeed the date. But what I'm going to ask you is whether you remember at that time the war against Vietnam that you mentioned as well this morning was raging. Do you remember that?
Some response. The war in which the Vietnamese attacked us was not remembered quite well by me, but from the words I got from the upper echelon, I learned that the Vietnamese came in. That's all I remember.
Très bien, Monsieur.
Thank you. Now, against the backdrop of this war, and I would urge you to recall what you learnt about that from the upper echelons, were you aware that at the same time as Vietnam was attacking you, it was also carrying out a campaign of denigration referring to Cambodia as a country of a genocide? Do you recall that?
Response. As a person who was in charge of protocol, I do not know anything about that. But if persons who were in charge in the information and propaganda section at the ministry, they would have knowledge of this.
Very well. Mr. Witness, I would perhaps refresh your memory by submitting to you an extract that we saw this morning in document D108/28.318, and the ERNs are as follows: 00, this is English, start again, S0001380, in Khmer S00870127, and in French S00793502. What we're looking at here is an extract from a Phnom Penh newspaper article that contains an interview with the head of the Japanese delegation at the end of the visit. And if I may, Mr. Witness, I will read the answer to a question that was put to him, on the basis of which I will ask you a question. Mr. President, do I have your leave to put this extract on the screen and to give the witness a copy of the Khmer version so that his task is facilitated?
The President, you may proceed. Court officer is now instructed to take the document from counsel and have it presented to the witness for examination.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Witness, now that you have the document, I'll read out one of the questions that was put to Kozo Sasaki. It's the third paragraph in the French version. The Vietnamese aggressors, international expansionism and imperialism are propagating slanderous propaganda, saying that the government of Democratic Cambodia is being isolated because the people are against it, that there is unrest throughout Cambodia, that there are no human rights in Cambodia, and that the people in Cambodia are being massacred. Now that you have been in democratic Cambodia for 2 weeks, what do you think of this propaganda? So that was the question that was put to the leader of the delegation. I'm not proposing to read out the answer that he gave straight away. I just want to ask you a question about this. As you recall, is this information that was officially known within the ministry in 1978 when you were there, information that was official about Vietnamese propaganda?
Response. I don't remember the substance of this. It is, I think, the person who imparted the information concerning this substance could have been the one from the propaganda section. And normally, according to my experience, when it comes to the journalism section or journalist section, I can say that people were not very accurate when it comes to the report, because their knowledge was not enough to make them an objective journalist. So the wording could have been exaggerating, and it is not falling under my section to do that.
D'accord.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Witness, since you accompanied that delegation, I'd like to read out the answer that the head of the delegation gave. And it comes straight after the question. Quote, "We have seen no massacres. The people have sufficient food to eat in the countryside. We've seen thousands of cattle in cooperatives. If the Cambodian people were short of food, they could kill all of those cattle in order to get meat. Therefore, the news about the Cambodian people experiencing food shortages is only a new Vietnamese deception. We must smash such deceitful propaganda. You concealed nothing from us during our visit. We have seen the true situation in democratic Cambodia." Mr. Witness, tell us, as far as you can remember, this report which the head of the delegation delivers, is it a true reflection of what you showed them during the tour of Cambodia?
Response. The words of the head of the Japanese delegation as cited, I don't think I remember them all. There was conversation while we were on our trip in the car. Today I came to know the writing itself, and it refreshes my memory as the head of the delegation. Normally such wordings would be very common. As a head of the delegation, one was supposed to tell the delegation like that, and he did mention that there were people he saw walking the cattle, and he saw those cattle in the fields, and it is true.
Thank you for that answer. This morning, you reminded the Chamber that what you were meant to do was talk about the victories you had achieved and say that you were proud of those victories. Is that a proper summary of what you said this morning answering the co-prosecutor?
Response. Normally, in any involvement in a movement, everyone would be pleased to congratulate the victory, and this reflects my position back then. I was happy along with the other people, including the military who jointly cheered the victory.
Oui, très
Very well. But at the same time, your statements in this courtroom that you have made since yesterday show that you had noticed that the population was short of food. In fact, you referred to this afternoon once again. Do you agree to this? Do you confirm?
Response: Yes, I do. What I saw was already inflected in my words, and I just said what I witnessed and what I understood. I already made some explanation concerning this, and no matter what happened, there would never be enough food to feed all the people, including those who were coming from different places. So my impression concerning this is maintained.
Very good. Thank you. Mr. Witness, is it therefore reasonable to infer that the information which the Ministry of Foreign Affairs asked you to communicate to guests on the predicament of the population was not a true reflection of reality, and the Ministry knew it? Is it fair to say that?
Response: What I indicated was part of my personal impression. The real situation, what the real situation was, I don't know, but it is just my personal and objective impression. Yeah.
Oui, monsieur le témoin, peut-être.
I think we need to be clear about this, Mr. Witness. What exactly do you mean when you say your personal impressions?
Response: My impression is the same. I noted that people did not have enough food to eat, no matter what.
Oui, alors, monsieur le témoin.
All right. Well, so that we are entirely clear on this point, perhaps I should put to you the minutes of your interview of the 13th of December 2007 that was made by the investigators of the Office of the Co-Investigating Judges. It's D91/22. In French, 0052 9341. And with the bench's leave, I would like to trigger the witness's memory by quoting the first question that was put to him in the document. I don't know if the Khmer version is available. If so, it could be given to the witness so that he can read it.
The President, so who should present this document to the witness? Are you prepared to give the document to the witness, or would you wish to ask someone else to help you with this?
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. President, I said that the Khmer version is available and that I would like to give it to the witness. I have it here in my hand.
The President, you may now proceed. Court officer is now instructed to fetch the document and have it handed over to the witness for examination.
Monsieur le témoin, je vous...
So, witness, let me just remind you of the first question and the answer that you gave. The question reads as follows. During the time you worked at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and during the time you accompanied the guests to visit Siem Reap and other places, what did you observe? Did you notice how people were living? And your answer was, I noted that people did not have sufficient food to eat. The situation was similar in each location. When there was plenty of food, people ate more. When there was not plenty, people ate less. The reason for the food shortages was that the local authority had to receive the city evacuees. Essentially, most people's work consisted in building dams and digging canals. They were putting into practice the policy of self-reliance. I never took the guests to work sites. So, having read that out, witness, my question to you is, when you say that this was what you noted, it was your impression, are you saying that this was different to the reality that you observed in situ?
Response. I personally note that it is the truth.
Merci pour cette...
Thank you for that answer. Coming back to the document that the co-prosecutor brought up, I'd like to read an extract that concerns Mr. Yeng Sari. This is document D108.318, once again. I'd like to read an extract from English ERNS 000131885. In Khmer it's S00810122, and in French it's S00793499.
Très bien. Monsieur,
In the French version, it's the second paragraph that I'm going to read to you, witness. It says, "The leaders we talked to had unwavering pride and felt bold confidence in the openness of the victorious. Yang Sari treated us at a banquet with fine Bordeaux wine, which he laughingly referred to as the spoils of war. Other top officials invariably wore expensive Swiss watches, and several were seen using West German or American fountain pens." Have you seen this extract, witness? Very good. In that case, let me ask you my question. Is this report a faithful reflection of an event that you were present at during the Japanese visit to Siem Reap? In company of Mr. Yang Sari, did he indeed offer a banquet to the Japanese delegation on that occasion?
Response. I don't remember this. With regard to this, I don't think everything is completely correct. Not everyone had in their possession these kind of materials you mentioned.
oui, monsieur le témoin.
Apart from the material details, do you remember the banquet? In fact, this morning you said you were in charge of organizing banquets. So do you remember whether or not this banquet was offered to this Japanese delegation that spent a fortnight in Cambodia?
Voilà.
Response. No, I don't remember this.
Très bien. Alors,
Very well. I know it was a long time ago, but I would like you to stretch your memory back a little bit. Do you remember the place where the Japanese delegation stayed in Siem Reap when you took them there?
Response. Immediately after the war was over, there was no hotel. I remember there was a hotel called Bungalow. I don't know what it was converted into later on. The place was adjacent to a concrete bridge, and that was the biggest hotel of all, and the guests would be asked to stay there.
très bien. À propos du...
Very well. Let's turn our attention to the trip made by the head of the delegation in particular. Perhaps I can trigger your memory once again by reading out an extract from the same document that you have before you. The page for the English ERN is S00013-184. In Khmer it's S0081012. and in French S00 79 34 98. With your leave, Mr. President, perhaps the court officer could make sure that the witness has found the right place in the document. It's just the previous page to the one we were looking at.
The President. Counsel, you may repeat the ERN in Khmer, because the two versions of the ERN's number you presented to us seem to be different.
Je vais le faire, monsieur.
Yes, sir. The Khmer code is S0081012. S0081012. We're in the same document, Mr. President. I gave a reference just now, and that was the subsequent page to the one we're looking at now. In French, it's S0070 now, and as read out previously, and now it's 0079 89, and I was looking at the 89 page, and now I want to take your attention back to S00 79 34 80 98 in French. In Khmer, it's S00 10 12. No. 81012. S00 81012. I believe that is clear now.
The President, assistant to the Council, may now put up the document on the screen so that we can verify the ER numbers.
Président, je pense que...
Mr. President, seeing as I have little time remaining, perhaps I can broach another subject with the witness and we can return to this particular point at a later stage. I have several topics that I'd like to address. Mr. Witness, do you have before you the document that I have just referenced?
Monsieur le témoin, est-ce que vous avez...
Mr. Witness, could you please answer me and tell me if you have before you the document and the specific page numbers I indicated?
The The President, Council, your document is not located, and on the screen it does not display the relevant EON page. You may confuse with the number because the relevant page being put up on the screen carries a different EON number.
Peut-être.
Indeed, Mr. President. I see now that the reference I gave earlier was not correct. Therefore, I will repeat S00810121. I beg your pardon. I'm afraid that I gave you the wrong number earlier on.
Alors, Monsieur le témoin, sans...
Now, Mr. Witness, without further ado, allow me to read aloud the first paragraph of this particular passage entitled Japanese Visitors' Impressions of Youthful Cambodian Regime. The text reads as follows, and I quote, Kozo Sasaki, leader of our delegation of the Japan-Cambodia Friendship Association, was somewhat abashed when, during our visit to Angkor Wat, he was housed in the gorgeously decorated main bedroom of Prince Norodom Sihanouk's detached palace in Siem Reap. Mr. Witness, my question for you is as follows. Does this particular passage refresh your memory over where Mr. Kozo Sasaki was staying during this particular visit?
Response. I stated earlier that, to my recollection, it was in a bungalow, and bungalow at that time was considered one of the finest hotel in Siem Reap. And as for the palace of the former king, I had not heard of it. That is what I can enlighten you on that issue.
Très bien, Monsieur le témoin.
Very well, witness. I'll move on to something else. However, it is still in connection to this particular visit. It would appear that Mr. Yang Sari had told this delegation of the evacuation of Phnom Penh. Now, once again, I'm referring to the same document, D108-28.318. This time, the ERNs are as follows. S000 13190. In Khmer, S00 81 0129 231. And in French, S0079 3503. I draw your attention to the last paragraph on the page in question, which, if I may, I will read aloud. I quote, Cambodian leaders sensitive to the evacuation of certain urban centers were at pains to explain to us the necessity of moving people to rural areas to attain their revolutionary goals. Deputy Prime Minister Ieng Sary told us that at the time of the liberation, 3 million of the nation's 8 million people lived in cities. Most, he said, were former farmers who had escaped bombings of liberation zones by U.S. forces and the former Cambodian regime's army. He explained that low food productivity had resulted in food shortages, and the drive to reach self-sufficiency required that these former farmers be moved back to rural areas. My question: do Ieng Sary's words and descriptions, according to your memory, reflect accurately the information that you were given, or that was conveyed to the visiting delegation with respect to Phnom Penh and with respect to other cities?
The President, witness, please hold on. The Defense Counsel for Ieng Sary, you may proceed.
My apologies for interrupting. I understand it's late in the day and the gentleman has a short period of time. However, if we look at the document, this is what a reporter claims Mr. Ieng Sary said. And so to be fair to Mr. Ieng Sary, perhaps the question should be rephrased to reflect that. This is hearsay information. Now to ask this gentleman if what Mr. Ieng Sary said is accurately reflected without first getting an acknowledgement from the witness, whether he was present and whether he heard Mr. Ieng Sary, would be unfair. On the other hand, if the gentleman wishes to rephrase to say whether, if indeed Mr. Ieng Sary said this, would this accurately reflect the situation as it was occurring at the time, I would not object to that question. But as posed, I think it's improper. Asking this witness to speculate.
Oui, Monsieur le Président.
Mr. President, I wish not to dwell on that objection, so I will rephrase my question. Mr. Witness, during the visit of this Japanese delegation, did you hear Mr. Ieng Sary provide explanations to those guests? Did you hear him talk about the evacuation of cities, and in particular the evacuation of Phnom Penh? Since at the time you were leading you were guiding the delegation.
From response. It was too long ago. And it was the dialogue between Ieng Sary and the Japanese delegation, and I cannot recall the detail of their dialogue. And if you ask me to verify this, the veracity of the content of their discussion, I cannot. do it.
Oui, Monsieur le témoin.
Mr. Witness, I will remind you of the paragraph that was read to you by the prosecutor this morning, in which it was stated that you, as a director of protocol, had guided the delegation and had explained that the vast majority of people had left and were evacuated and were able to return to their home villages. This particular passage was read to you this morning. My question to you is, did you talk about the issue of the evacuation of cities with the Japanese delegation?
Response. I cannot recall it clearly, but even if there was some explanation to the guests, but it was within the context in which I stated earlier. And one of the reasons for evacuating people out of the city was because of the fear of aerial bombardments. And I did not see that people were evacuated by force, but there was a public appeal that people who came from any particular location in the countryside as their hometown, they should move or they should head that respective direction.
Bien, Monsieur le témoin.
Mr. Witness, you testified that on the 17th of April, in the evening, you returned to your sector by motorbike. Do you remember this?
But response, that is correct.
Est-ce que
Did you take anyone with you as a passenger on your motorbike when you left? Were you alone, or was there somebody accompanying you?
Generally, in time of war, we did not go anywhere alone. Normally, there was a youth who took me on a motorbike. In other words, we went there with the two of us.
c'était un jeune Khmer rouge?
It was a young Khmer Rouge soldier. Is that correct?
But respond, he was a youth in the army, in the battlefield.
Alors, ce qui veut dire...
Therefore, Mr. Witness, the masses and the crowds that you had seen during your journey, which you had described during your testimony, you didn't know that these people were returning to their home villages? You didn't know where they were going? Is this correct?
But the response, basically, people left Phnom Penh in accordance with the public appeal that anyone who came from any location should return there. But those who were the Phnom Penh dweller, they left through route number 4. And those who came from Kampong Cham or from Kampong Chnang, they left through National Road number 5. And there was a sheer volume of people. So again, in that situation, they could not travel that far within a day, so it took them several days to reach the destination.
Vous avez également
Mr. Witness, you testified several times that ultimately, because of the evacuations, there were food shortages throughout the country. And this was on top of the fact that yields and harvests were very poor. Is this true? Is this an accurate reflection of the testimony that you have provided on previous occasions?
Yes, that is correct.
donc il est raisonnable.
Therefore, Mr. Witness, it would be entirely reasonable to conclude that it would be inaccurate to consider that residents of Phnom Penh would have been able to reach their home villages under the Democratic Cambodia regime and help resolve the food shortages.
Response: I do not understand the question. Could you please clarify your question?
Oui, monsieur le témoin.
Yes, of course. Allow me to simplify. Now, even if some of the statements made by Ying Sari are being challenged, one of the reasons why the residents of Phnom Penh were evacuated was firstly because they originally came from rural areas, and secondly, there were food shortages in Phnom Penh, and as a result, they were being sent to rural zones in order to find sustenance. Isn't this a reasonable conclusion to draw?
The President, I note the Defense Counsel is on his feet. You may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, I apologize. I'm uncertain whether the gentleman is suggesting that this is what Mr. Ingsari is saying, or whether this gentleman is aware of these are the reasons that those who made the decision used for the purposes of the evacuation. It's utterly unclear exactly what he's talking about. I think if we go step by step, whether the gentleman knows exactly the reasons, how he knows them, and so on, I have no objections. Clearly, because of his position, he may or may not know. But I think to sort of take a statement that somebody else wrote, claiming this is what Mr. Ingsari said, and then from that try to extract something and then put it to the witness, I think is utterly improper. So perhaps the gentleman should either rephrase or give up.
Oui, monsieur le témoin.
Mr. President, I will preclude the Chamber from having to rule on this issue. Allow me to move on to another topic. Witness, you provided some explanations and descriptions of your propaganda activities when you were working in Sector 32. You testified before this chamber that you were encouraging the masses to produce, and you were talking about techniques to increase productivity. And all of this was part and parcel of your duties of farming and agricultural production. But can you please tell us exactly what kind of production techniques you were teaching the masses? Can you please provide us some specifications on that?
Response. We propagandize the people to improve their production, agricultural production. And that time, we had nothing to convince them other than trying to grow grains, and as an alternate growing, we encourage them to plant potatoes. And as for agricultural techniques, we actually encourage them to make use of the lowland along the riverbank, and so that they can do farming during dry season. They can get the water from the river. So this is the technique, and there is nothing special about that technique.
On the same topic, you also stated that the encouraging and words of encouragement comprise the message of being able to yield 2 or 3 harvests in one season. Is that correct?
I don't think it is correct, because the situation or the land condition over there would not allow farmers to do farming 3 times a year, because the land was not that fertile, and in addition there was water shortage as well.
Est-ce que,
during those propaganda activities, did you spread the slogan 2 to 3 tons per hectare?
Response. That was the instruction, and of course people at the lower level had to abide by the instructions, so we had to continue to propagandize and encourage people to comply with the instruction. But in actuality, it depended on the condition, the agricultural condition of each location. The majority could not achieve the target set.
est-ce que dans le cas
And during those propaganda activities, did you ever raise the health condition or health status of the masses who were responsible for meeting that target?
I cannot recall it all, but generally I had to mention it, because at that time there was a question of the fact that when the war was over, we were in short of many things. So in preparing medicines, we normally use the 3 roots in order to boil into water to produce traditional medicine, and we actually had some medical personnel as well.
In your opinion, Mr. Witness, were those remedies sufficient in maintaining the good health of the masses you had under your charge in Sector 32?
Response. Normally, it is part of the solution. We would need to substitute the rice with other things that people could eat, but it was still not enough. And I can say that we could never substitute the rice with some kind of potatoes or other roots.
Mr. President, I see that we have exceeded our usual end time by a few minutes. I still have a few issues to raise with the witness. I do not believe that it will take me longer than 5 minutes. Do I have your leave to raise one additional document before I close my cross-examination?
The President, you may proceed. However, you should be reminded that some potentially important questions should have already been prepared to put to the witness to avoid needing more time to put some additional questions. But you may proceed.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Witness? I wish to draw your attention to a document that was put to you by the co-prosecutor this morning. It is an issue of the revolutionary flag, in which Nunchia's speech is recorded. It was a speech that he delivered in the zone in July 1977. Allow me to recall the ERN numbers. In French, 0071 1840. In Khmer, 0006 29 64. And in English, 0039 92 35 to 36. I'll simply read you a passage from this speech, Mr. Witness. Mr. Nunchia says the following. Nevertheless, in a good number of cooperatives, power is still not in the hands of the workers and the party. It is in the hands of other classes. If power remains in the hands of other classes, are those classes loyal and rallying with the revolution? No. They are against the revolution. We must bring together poor peasants and all other farmers so that they can take over the cooperative, so that they can smash the other classes who are controlling our cooperatives. This problem does not affect only the West Zone, but all zones across the country. Mr. Witness, my question for you is this. Do you have a memory of Mr. Nunchia raising the issue of social classes during the assembly meeting of July 1977 that was held in your zone?
Response. I don't recollect it. So far as I heard or known, such a message could never been ever heard, because the cooperatives normally would be chosen by the commune branches, and also decisions were consulted with the upper echelon. And I may say in short that I don't remember the details.
In Sector 32, did you know a certain person called Ham? Ham, H-A-M.
But
Response. I don't know this person. With regard to Sector 31, I only know the person by the name of Ta Sarun, who was involved in that sector.
J'ai parlé du
I was talking about Sector 32, Mr. Witness. Does the name Ham ring a bell?
but
Response. There is no person by the name of Ham in Sector 32.
Very well, Mr. President, I believe that brings me to the end of my cross-examination. I take note of the comment you made earlier. I do believe that I put a certain number of significant questions to the witness, and I wish to thank him for his answers. Thank you.
The President. Thank you, Counsel. Thank you, witness. The hearing for today has come to an end. The Chamber will adjourn by now, and the next session will be resumed by tomorrow at 9 a.m. During tomorrow's sessions, the Chamber will continue listening or hearing Mr. Nigon, the questions to be put by counsels for Nguyen Chia first. Mr. Nikon, your testimonies are not yet finished, and you are required to be present tomorrow for further testimonies. And Duty Council is also asked to come back tomorrow and the following day to assist the witness. Court officer is instructed to coordinate with the vessel to ensure that Mr. Witness is well coordinated and that he is properly accommodated and that he return to the courtroom tomorrow by the time indicated. Security personnel are now instructed to bring all the accused persons to the detention facility and have them return to the courtroom by 9 a.m. As for Mr. Ieng Sari, if he indicates that he wishes to observe the proceedings from his holding cell as the day with his waiver produced in writing before the commencement of tomorrow's session, then he will be instructed to remain in the holding cell where he can follow the proceedings from where the court is adjourned.
សូមអញ្ជើញក្រោកឈរ